This is Lesson 5, Rocks Rock, the last lesson in the Soils and Rocks unit for Grade 2. If you did not already finish your experiment with the plants growing in the 3 different types of soil, this is a good time to finish that and have students make their final observations in their workbook. Today we're going to be looking at some properties of 3 different types of rocks. So students will have a bag that have 3 different types of rocks, and we're going to ask them to observe them. They can talk about size as a classification that they have already done. They can also, for this experiment, they should also include 2 of the rocks that they've brought from home that they found interesting. So they're going to make observations based on the things that they already know. They have in their workbook a place where they can make a drawing of the rock, and they can do written observations of what it looks like as well. Then we're going to look at 2 different properties today. The first property students are going to look at is the hardness of the rock samples, and they're going to do a scratch test to do this. They can refer back to the previous lesson about how pumice is very soft and how that caused it to get so much smaller when it was weathering. So we're going to show a different way other than shaking with other rocks to test the hardness of a particular rock sample. So students will use a washer and the rock, and encourage them to do this over a piece of paper because it is a little bit easier then to see or feel what came off of the rock. So they'll hold the rock sample and they'll scratch it with the washer. And it may not seem like much has come off, but then they can feel it and see small samples of what has come off. And they're going to do that with all 3 samples to see what was the same or what was different with each sample that they scratched. And they'll notice that some, as they're scratched, have bigger pieces come off than others. And again, that's just because not all rocks have the same hardness as their properties. They can do that as well with the rocks that they've brought from home and compare and contrast that to the samples that are here. The next test that they're going to do is an acid test or a vinegar test. And this is to see how the different samples react when we put vinegar on them. 2 of the samples in here are limestone and marble, and we're not letting students know which ones those are, but they will have a reaction when the vinegar is applied to them. So again, remind students that to use the pipette, they squeeze the air out first, then they open that once it's already in the vinegar. They don't need to pour this all over, they just need to do a couple of drops. They can see a reaction happening if it's a sample that will react with the vinegar. Encourage them to use multiple senses. They can hold it up and listen. If it's quiet enough, they can hear. Just remind them that in science, we don't ever use taste as one of our observations unless it's something the teacher has told you can do safely. And they're going to record the observations on there as well. So they'll do the vinegar test. Again, just a couple of drops is all that's needed. They'll do that with the samples that are included in the kit, as well as with their 2 samples from home as well. Okay. Once they've done this, you can review what has been learned about rocks in the last couple of lessons, as well as what they've learned all together through the whole Soils and Rocks unit, as this is the end of that unit.